There are moments in life that feel like slow-motion train wrecks. You see them coming, feel the tension mounting, and yet you're powerless to stop it. For me, it began with a napkin. Yeah, a plain, crumpled restaurant napkin wedged in the passenger seat of my wife's car. That alone shouldn't mean anything. But it had a lipstick kiss mark, bold, burgundy, not Amber's usual shade, and a name scribbled on it. Thanks for last night, M. I remember just standing there in the garage, keys dangling from my fingers, heart tapping some new anxious rhythm. I stared at that napkin like it had whispered something obscene. Now, let me give you the backdrop. I'm Justin Reynolds, 34, contractor, small town Ohio. My wife, Amber, is 32, a dental hygienist with the kind of laugh that used to make men do double takes and make me feel like I'd won the lottery. Together, people called us the golden couple. That's what folks at church said, what my friends said when they saw our Christmas card each year, her perfect smile, my proud grin, our dog Cooper in the middle like a bow on top. We were the kind of couple that hosted barbecues, handed out relationship advice, and had matching flannel pajamas for holiday photos. But let me tell you something about perfection, it's fragile. One gust of truth, and the whole facade collapses. That napkin. It started everything. The odd part was that I wasn't even snooping. I'd taken Amber's car because mine needed a new radiator. I reached over to move the seat back and there it was, sticking out like it had waited for me. My stomach didn't drop, not yet. That came later. At first, I thought, maybe it was a prank. Maybe one of her girlfriends left it there as a joke. But when I asked her casually at dinner, just offhand, about her coworkers, any new names, she got twitchy. Amber never got twitchy. She's smooth as marble, always composed, even when the house is on fire. Her fork paused mid-air. New names, she echoed. No, same old crew. Why? I shrugged. Just wondering. Thought I saw a note in your car. Something about M. Her smile twitched. Probably one of the girls from the lunch crew. They write dumb stuff sometimes. That sounded plausible. Until I remembered something, Amber doesn't eat lunch in her car. She eats in the break room. Always has. She's meticulous like that, doesn't like crumbs in the seats, doesn't like smells lingering. That night, I didn't sleep. It wasn't the napkin that did me in. It was her lie. A small one, sure, but it was the crack in the dam. And when I started looking, more cracks appeared. Her schedule had shifted. She was suddenly working late on Tuesdays. Always Tuesdays. I'd call, and she'd pick up on the third ring, voice just a little too breathless, like she'd jogged across the parking lot. Sorry babe, she'd say. Just leaving the office now. Long day. But the GPS in her car, which I never thought to check until then, told a different story. On those Tuesdays, she wasn't at the clinic past 6. She was somewhere off Main and Berkeley. Near the old Comfort Inn. Coincidence? I wish. So I did something I didn't think I'd ever do. I followed her. Next Tuesday, I left work early, parked 2 blocks away in a borrowed car, and waited. Around 6:05, she pulled into the Comfort Inn parking lot. I watched her sit there for a few minutes, like she was waiting for someone. Then a gray Jeep rolled in next to her, and out came a man. I couldn't see his face clearly, but he was tall, clean-shaven, with that easy confidence that made my stomach churn. Amber got out of her car too. They didn't hug. They didn't kiss. But they walked into that hotel together like they'd done it before. Like it was routine. I didn't follow. I couldn't. My hands were glued to the steering wheel. My chest felt tight, my breath shallow. That's when the napkin came back into focus. A thank you. A kiss. An M. And suddenly, I couldn't stop wondering who the hell M really was. I didn't confront her that night. That would have been too easy, too impulsive. I'd spent my whole life solving problems with a hammer and nails, but this needed something finer. Something slower. The kind of patience a hunter uses when stalking prey. So I let the week pass. I smiled when I had to, kissed her forehead in the morning, asked about her day like I hadn't watched her walk into a motel with a man who wasn't me. And I started planning. Not for a fight, not yet, but for clarity. I needed more than suspicion. I needed proof, patterns, names. Maybe even a motive. That Friday morning, over coffee, I tested the waters. "Hey," I said casually, watching her spoon creamer into her mug, "I was thinking we could use a little break. Maybe you could take a weekend to yourself. Go visit your cousin in Indiana. I'll stay behind, get some work done on the deck." She didn't look up. Just stirred her coffee, slow and deliberate. "This weekend?" she asked, voice too flat to be curious. "Yeah," I said, "just a thought. You've been working so hard lately. You deserve a breather." She shook her head. "Can't. I've got patients booked on Saturday. Sheila's on vacation, so we're short-staffed. I promised I'd cover." That was her answer. Short. Clean. Practiced. And something about it made the hairs on my neck stand straight. Amber hated working Saturdays. She used to complain about it non-stop. She'd swap shifts, beg coworkers, invent excuses if she had to. Now suddenly she's volunteering to cover. I nodded, pretended to accept it, but inside I was cataloging every word, every flicker in her voice. I'd already installed a small dash camera in her car earlier in the week. Tucked in behind the rearview mirror. Not for video, too risky. But it recorded audio when the engine ran. She never noticed. It was one of those gadgets I bought, for safety, and she didn't question it. I'd also quietly synced her location sharing to my phone, under the guise of emergency preparedness. These days, people gave away access to their lives like it was nothing. The trick was knowing what to look for once you had the keys. Saturday morning came, and sure enough, she left just before 9, dressed sharp, makeup flawless. She said she'd be back around 2. I kissed her cheek, told her to drive safe. She smiled, but her eyes skipped mine too quickly. The moment she was out the door, I grabbed my phone, opened the tracking app, and watched the little blue dot that was my wife drift toward downtown. Then, curiously, it veered. Not toward the clinic. Not even close. She turned west, headed straight for the Comfort Inn again. Same hotel. Same pattern. Different Saturday. I felt that old weight in my chest, the one that comes when reality finally confirms what your instincts already screamed. But I didn't follow. Not this time. Instead, I waited. I made lunch. I watched a game I didn't care about. I checked her location every 10 minutes like a man checking the tide. 2 hours. 3. Then 4. The dot finally moved again. Back to town. Back to our house. When she came through the door, I was in the garage, pretending to sand the side of a planter box. She called out, "Hey babe, I'm home," like she'd just returned from the most boring day of dental work ever. I didn't answer right away. I let her settle. I let the silence hang. Later, she brought me a glass of lemonade. "I hope you got some sun," she said cheerfully. I took it, met her eyes. "You look nice," I said. "That blouse new?" She hesitated. "Just a flicker." "Oh, this?" "No, just something I dug out of the back." I looked at the blouse. Pale blue, satin, the kind she usually saves for evenings out, not for poking around molars all day. I smiled. "Looks good on you." She smiled back. But her hand trembled just slightly as she sipped her drink. And that was when I knew, she was hiding something. Not just an affair. Not just a lapse. Something bigger. Something careful. And I'd be just as careful. Because now I wasn't just suspicious. I was certain. And I planned to gather every piece before making my next move. The next step had to be precise. No more speculation, no more breadcrumb trails. I needed the whole loaf, served fresh with a side of undeniable truth. That Sunday night, as Amber folded laundry in the living room and the hum of the dryer masked the awkward silence between us, I cleared my throat and said what I'd been rehearsing all afternoon. I told her I'd been asked to travel for work. A client upstate needed help with a renovation estimate. Nothing major, just 2 nights. She didn't even blink. Just nodded, said, "Makes sense, do you need me to pack you anything?" That response was too smooth. Almost too rehearsed. Like she'd been expecting it. Or worse, hoping for it. I declined the offer, smiled, kissed her forehead, told her I'd leave Monday night after dinner and be back by Wednesday morning. She looked pleased, in that subtle way people do when they think they've just been given free rein. After she went to bed, I stayed up pretending to do invoices. What I was really doing was preparing the equipment I'd picked up from a guy who used to work surveillance for insurance fraud cases. Small, hidden cameras, easy to mount behind vents and bookshelves. Voice-activated audio recorders that fit behind the TV, inside lamp bases, tucked between couch cushions. By Monday afternoon, everything was in place. I knew every corner of my own house, every creak in the floorboards, every dusty corner no one ever dusted. I didn't put a single thing in the bedroom. I already knew what went on there, or at least suspected enough not to need a front row seat. I focused on the living room, the kitchen, the hallway near the front door, and most importantly, the area near the back patio, Amber's favorite spot to take phone calls. That evening, I cooked us dinner. Chicken stir-fry, nothing fancy, but familiar. She seemed relaxed, cheerful even. Not in the guilty way I'd imagined. More like she was just free. At one point, she made a joke and touched my arm the way she used to, and for a second, I almost questioned myself. Maybe I'd read too much into everything. Maybe the hotel trips were, no, maybe. That ship had sailed. After dinner, I loaded my overnight bag into the truck, kissed her goodbye, and drove off down the road. Once I was sure she couldn't see me in her mirrors, I looped around, parked behind the abandoned gas station 3 blocks away, and waited for darkness to settle. Then I crept back, slipped through the gate behind our yard, and made my way to the shed. It had a small heater and just enough space for a chair, a cooler, and my laptop. I felt ridiculous, like a spy in my own life, but this was where the real test began. The camera feeds flickered to life, grainy but clear enough. The audio recorders synced with my headphones. I sat there in silence, watching my own house glow with domestic calm from the outside, like a snow globe with a secret crack in the glass. For the first few hours, nothing happened. Amber watched some home improvement show, folded a few towels, then made tea. Around 10:30, she pulled out her phone and walked toward the patio doors. My ears perked up as the microphone near the curtains picked up her voice. It was low and excited. She told someone she was alone. That the coast was clear. That they had until morning. My jaw clenched. I stayed glued to the screen. She freshened up in the bathroom, then lit a candle on the kitchen counter. Around 11:15, headlights flashed through the window. A gray Jeep pulled into the driveway. Not the motel this time. No cover of darkness. No sneaky detours. She was inviting it right into our home. I watched as she opened the door with a smile I hadn't seen in months. The man stepped inside casually, like he belonged. Tall. Athletic. Dark jacket. I didn't recognize him, but I didn't need to. He laughed as he kicked off his shoes, then followed her into the living room. The audio caught bits of their chatter, something about how quiet the neighborhood was, how the couch looked different. She told him I had no idea. That I was out of town for real this time. I swallowed hard, fingers digging into the arms of the chair. It was happening, right there in my living room, beneath the framed wedding photo she'd insisted we hang above the fireplace. The betrayal was no longer an idea. It had a face, a voice, and it was sitting on my couch. I leaned closer to the screen, watching, listening, waiting. Not to storm in. Not yet. I wasn't after revenge tonight. I was after the whole truth. And now I had it on camera. As I leaned closer to the monitor, squinting at the grainy feed, something felt off. The angle wasn't perfect, but I could make out the guy's frame, the way he moved, the shape of his jaw, the lazy way he leaned against the kitchen counter like he owned the place. It stirred something in me, something half familiar, like a song you haven't heard in years but still know the chorus to. I narrowed my eyes, inching the screen closer, trying to get a clearer view. Amber stepped aside, laughing at something he said, and that's when his face turned just enough to catch the light. My breath caught. The blood drained from my face so fast I thought I might black out. It was him. My brother. Daniel. I didn't move. Couldn't. I just sat there, staring, the world around me collapsing in slow motion. I hadn't seen him in years, not since the wedding. He showed up late that day, already halfway into a bottle of something strong, made a toast that barely made sense, and vanished before the cake was cut. We never spoke after that. Not a falling out, not a feud, just silence that grew roots and settled in. I always thought he stayed away because he couldn't stand the quiet life I'd built. Thought it bored him. Thought I bored him. But now I was staring at him on my screen, standing in my kitchen, wearing my blood, and laughing with my wife. It didn't feel real. For a second, I actually looked away from the monitor, like maybe if I blinked, it would reset and show me a stranger again. But when I looked back, he was still there, clear as day, helping himself to something in the fridge like this was his house, his woman, his life. I couldn't hear anything beyond the pounding in my ears. I had expected a stranger. A nameless guy, maybe someone from Amber's work or gym. Some random mistake I could hate in a distant, impersonal way. But this? This was betrayal carved from the inside out. This was family. This was a man who once shared a bedroom with me growing up. Who taught me how to throw a curveball. Who borrowed my jacket for his first job interview and never returned it. And now he was standing in the kitchen where I made Amber coffee every morning, where we talked about starting a family, where she once danced barefoot while spaghetti boiled. I felt like I'd been kicked in the ribs, not once but over and over. My hand hovered over the laptop keyboard, shaking slightly. I could stop the recording, barge in, scream, demand, tear everything down right there and then. But I didn't. I sat back slowly, my fists clenched so tight my knuckles ached. I had to see how far this went. I had to know if this was new or if I'd just been the last to find out. My brother. Of all people. The weight of it settled in my chest like wet cement. And still, I watched. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in that shed until the sky turned a dull gray and the birds started chirping like nothing in the world was wrong. I stared at that frozen frame on the monitor, at the image of my brother leaning back on my couch with the ease of someone who'd been there a dozen times before, maybe more. I replayed the footage until I knew every movement, every smirk, every glance between them. I didn't feel heartbreak anymore. That had already been scorched to ash. What I felt now was clarity, cold and sharp. This wasn't just about a marriage falling apart. This was about betrayal wearing two faces I knew all too well. Amber, the woman I once believed was my other half. Daniel, the brother I defended more times than I could count. My loyalty had been repaid with secret meetings and stolen nights. They thought I was a fool. They thought I'd never know. And now that I did, I wasn't going to yell or beg or throw things. No. That would give them too much. They didn't deserve my anger. They deserved consequence. Real consequence. And I was going to start with him. Daniel was the type who drifted from one thing to another. Jobs, apartments, women, always just out of reach of responsibility. He was charming when it suited him, slippery when it didn't. The last I'd heard, he'd been trying to get into some real estate hustle, playing businessman with borrowed money and fake smiles. I figured if he was still trying to impress people, especially Amber, he wouldn't want his dirty laundry aired out. I had leverage now, and I planned to use it. The next day, I took off work. I told my crew I had family matters to deal with. That wasn't a lie. I started by gathering every piece of footage, organizing it by timestamp, labeling clips like evidence. I made copies, digital, physical, even one on a thumb drive I left in my truck just in case something went sideways. I wasn't going to be caught unprepared. Then I did a little digging. Daniel wasn't hard to trace. He was renting a tiny apartment on the other side of town, still pretending to be someone important. Still putting on that grin that used to get him out of trouble when we were kids. I drove by his place, saw the same gray Jeep parked out front, just like the one from the video. I didn't go in. Not yet. I went home and drafted a letter instead. Just a few sentences, short and clean. I enclosed one of the printed photos from the surveillance, Daniel sitting on my couch with a drink in hand, Amber beside him, both laughing like they didn't just burn a man's life to the ground. I signed the letter with no name. Just the words, "I know what you've done." I sealed it, dropped it in his mailbox that evening, then drove off without looking back. The next morning, I parked across the street and waited. Sure enough, just after 10, Daniel stepped outside in a wrinkled shirt and messy hair, probably expecting the world to treat him kindly again. He opened the mailbox, pulled out the envelope, and stood there for a long time, staring at the photo. I saw his body stiffen, his head snap left and right like someone might be watching. He knew. Or at least, he guessed. And that was the start. I wasn't going to throw fists or start shouting matches. I was going to let the paranoia grow. Let him look over his shoulder, wonder when the next shoe would drop. Because it would. And I'd be the one to drop it. Piece by piece, I was going to dismantle the fantasy they'd built, starting with the brother who thought betrayal came without a price. It didn't take long for the first cracks to show. After I sent the letter and photo, Daniel started unraveling just the way I'd hoped. He stopped showing up to whatever small-time office he was working at, probably some startup he convinced to hire him with charm and fake confidence. I waited a week, then sent another envelope. This time it went to his employer, addressed to their HR department. Inside, another photo, a short note explaining the nature of Daniel's relationship with a married woman, the wife of a client whose home he had visited under false pretenses. Whether or not they believed it didn't matter. The seed was planted. A week later, he was let go. According to a mutual acquaintance, he told people he left to pursue other opportunities, but his eyes gave him away, nervous, twitchy, constantly scanning the room like the walls were closing in. I made sure to tighten them. I called his landlord, posing as a property manager from a previous place. Told them Daniel had left damages, unpaid rent, and a neighbor complaint involving someone's wife. That was all it took. A week later, Daniel received notice that his lease would not be renewed. His credit wasn't great, and without a job, his options shrank fast. I watched him move out with 2 duffel bags and a plastic storage bin, cramming everything he owned into the back of his Jeep. I followed him from a distance, just to see where he'd land. A cheap motel off the highway. The kind with buzzing neon signs and a parking lot full of oil stains. Poetic, in a way. He had entered my life again through a motel door, and now he was crawling back into one with nothing but guilt and a toothbrush. I could have stopped there. I could have walked away knowing I dismantled every piece of the illusion he tried to build for himself. But this wasn't just about him. There was still Amber. She had watched me leave for a fake business trip, invited another man into our home, laughed in my kitchen while I sat just yards away in a shed, listening. She didn't just betray me, she mocked me. So I planned the next phase with the same precision. I started small. Removed her name from every account I legally could. Bank cards, insurance policies, even the auto pay for her phone bill. I left just enough operational so she wouldn't notice right away. Then I moved on to reputation. I collected everything I had, video clips, audio recordings, timestamps, even the GPS logs that showed her movements aligning with hotel visits. I put them together into a neat file, labeled and organized. I sent an anonymous email to the clinic where she worked. No threats, no dramatic message. Just the material, all of it, along with a simple note: one of your employees has been conducting a long-term relationship with a married relative of a patient. I left it and signed. I didn't need credit. I needed results. Within days, I heard whispers. A friend of a friend who worked near the front desk said Amber had been called in for a meeting with the regional manager. There had been complaints. Concerns about professionalism. Apparently one of the other hygienists had seen Daniel in the parking lot more than once. Things escalated from there. She wasn't fired, but she was put on leave pending investigation. And that's when she started to notice the financial holes. The missing access. The unpaid phone bill. The calls from her credit card company. She came home one evening in a storm of panic, asking if I had changed something. I told her I'd been working on tightening our expenses. Things had gotten too loose. She smiled weakly, clearly unsettled, but not ready to connect the dots. That was fine. I didn't want her to understand too soon. I wanted her to feel the dread sink in slowly, to question every detail, to wonder when her carefully maintained story would fall apart. Because just like Daniel, she had taken something from me that can't be returned. And I had no intention of letting her keep anything in exchange.